Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Laurie Frankel. Laurie is the New York Times best-selling, award-winning author of the novels Family, 123, Goodbye for Now, The Atlas of Love, and the Reese's Book Club pick, This Is How It Always Is. Frankel lives in Seattle with her husband, daughter, and border collie, and Enormous Wings is her newest novel. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Oh my God. And so I was just telling Laurie before we started recording, as all of you listeners know, I usually interview other suspense authors. And Laurie is officially my first not suspense author, but there's so much lovely suspense in this book. We are literally on edge for much of the book. And before we dig into all the wonderful things, will you tell our listeners about Enormous Wings?
Yes. Okay. I'm so honored and thrilled, really, to be the inaugural non-suspense author on this podcast. But yes, there's tons of suspense. Enormous Wings is about a 77-year-old grandma who moves into a retirement community against her will and better judgment at the behest of her adult children, and is, however, surprised and delighted when she gets there to make friends and even fall in love. But then she falls ill. And however, when she goes to the doctor, she finds out she's not sick, she's pregnant.
Oh God, it's so clever. And then Laurie, tell us where she lives.
Right. Okay. Yes. And she lives in Texas. So that's and in fact, it's an interesting story, if we can have a small aside, which is that
Yes.
I wrote this book in 2017. And I mean, I wrote it like I researched, I drafted, I revised, I edited, I polished, I wrote the entire book in 2017. And I just couldn't quite convince you that this character would do anything other than have an abortion.
Right.
And so I put it in a drawer and walked away and wrote two other books. And when I picked it back up in 2023, it had been set in Seattle because I live in Seattle, and that was just the easiest place to put it. And all I had to do in 2023 was move it to Texas, or one of the 13 states where abortion had, in those intervening few years, become illegal. And that not only bridged that plot hole, but it also refocused this book where it was meant to be all along, which is on these issues of agency and bodily autonomy, and how good a metaphor aging is for all of those issues that we usually talk about within this like really narrow framework of abortion that no one has ever changed their minds about. And so it's kind of a pointless discussion, and pointless isn't what I want to say. It isn't, but it's not necessarily like a fruitful discussion which everyone attends with like full hearts and open minds. And so putting it in Texas really blew this book up. Yeah.
And actually, it occurred to me that the other books of yours that I've read are set in Seattle.
Mostly, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's so interesting that, but then of course, as soon and it, of course, I'm reading along so happily, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, she's in Texas. Like,
Oh no.
that is like, because, I'm in Montana, which is a conservative state, but we're still, it's written into our state constitution, free to, choice, thank God. But it is such an interesting, and I agree with you, and I love the fact that she doesn't choose to go there. She has this tiny little fender bender, and and her three adult children decide, which adult children, I mean, I don't know where you are in the stage, but my parents are aging, and we're trying to figure out how to help them. And they want to, my mother really wants to stay in her home for, better or worse. It's a very interesting sandwich, generation, and then also having children that are, launching.
Yes.
It's so interesting that you wrote this in 2017.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
And incredible foresight.
I mean, I think not a word of that draft remains. I don't think there's a single intact sentence. I genuinely, I mean, I rewrote this book even when I started it again in 2023. I rewrote it many, 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 so many times. Um, but it was, so I don't, the idea was the same. Many of the characters are the same. I genuinely don't think a single sentence remains. It was a complete, it was as complete an overhaul as you can do and still call it the same book.
Well, and I think I mean, let's talk about that because I think that's so interesting for process, right? I mean, I think when you write a book, you're writing it very much in sort of the where you are in the world, where the world
Right.
is in the world.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
even if even if of course from what I can read here, of course it makes perfect sense to have just taken it from Seattle to Texas and boom, boom, you're done. But so what did you so when you came back to that job, and have you done this before where you put something aside for so many years?
No, this was my first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what,
Yeah.
so what was that like to come back to it? And because even though you're obviously you're such a, successful and talented author, it wasn't as though you weren't talented and became talented in that period.
Right.
So what was it that sort of, what happens for you when you saw it again?
Yeah, I mean, such good questions, all of them. One of the things is, as you say, my parents got older and my kids got older. I mean, of course, I got older too, but for me, it was, what was it, like 6 years, I guess, ish, in between putting the one down and picking up the other, maybe seven. And like, okay, whatever. I got a little older. It wasn't that momentous, although I did turn 50 and could be that, certainly. But mostly, like, my parents got older and my kid got older in ways that were, kind of earth-shattering. And so you can see all of that in this book that really was less at issue before. Um, it was a much darker, it was a little more, it was less earnest. It was a little more tongue-in-cheeky, I think. It was a little bit more satire. And and another thing that I think has happened since 2017 is these issues, many issues have gotten less funny.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say
and
it can't be satire anymore because it's too real.
can't be satire anymore because it is too real, is astonishing to me. How many things about which that is true. And and also just, I don't know, the extent to which feel like I'm no longer in the mood to be kind of wryly amused. But I think the book is really funny.
Oh, it's so
I'm very
funny.
funny.
I
I
was,
was,
yeah, it's so,
oh,
and I live with three men, and I was sitting in the corner of the couch, and I'm laughing out loud at the book, and they're like, "What's the book?" It's this is my new partner and his two children who are sixth and seventh grade, so they're young
oh,
men,
oh.
and I'm explaining what the premise is, and they're like, "What? She's 77 and pregnant?" And I'm like, and it's so she's in Texas, and they get it. They're like, "Huh?" And I'm like, it is so funny. There's so, I mean, and it's not sixth and seventh grade boy humor, Laurie. I'm sorry.
No, no. And
It's
I think that's probably a compliment, or at least I'm going to
probably
take it as
good, but
such.
exactly. But
Yeah,
it's so funny, and there's so many wonderful things about, with her relationship with Moth and the two older, her older friends, and I mean,
yeah,
all the, heartache of being, at the end of your life, um,
yeah.
or sort of being at the point where the end of your life is closer than the not end of your life, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying it, I would never, and I kept thinking to myself, I want to write a funny book. And I'm like, I just don't know how you do it. I think it's so, and I want to, so that is, I can see I understand what you're saying. And I can imagine a sort of a lighter, more sort of, like you said, a satire version of this, but it isn't that now.
It isn't that now, no. And it was a question, like, I knew I always want readers to be happy. I want you to be amused and entertained. And I'm not going to give you a lecture. I don't want to, it's not didactic. It's like none of these things.
No.
But I, but it just became more earnest, like heartfelt. Like it just stopped. There's so many things that have stopped being funny, in the last few years. And so it was a question of how to how to keep the reader embraced and entertained and buoyed along but also talk about some things, which
Right.
is always my goal. I want to have conversation.
You do that and you do it beautifully. And actually that is and actually Texas in particular, like, there's this, and for those people who don't really know all the ins and outs of like Texas law, there's for instance that you can have an abortion if it's for the, if it's the mother is in danger, which in this case, of course you can argue she's in danger. She's a 77-year-old carrying a pregnancy, which,
Right.
one of her
Right.
doctors argues that is, potentially could kill her. And then, and the other thing is if you transport a pregnant person outside of Texas for the purpose of getting an abortion, you can also go to jail. And so there's all these and these laws, however you feel about,
Right.
abortion and whatever, there are some very scary precedents being set for people's, autonomy and power and I think we follow her along and the thing, and the ways in which this book develops. There's no way it could have developed that way. You wouldn't have been able to
No.
dream up the insanity that is happening right now in Texas, right? I mean,
No.
kind of.
Absolutely. I could not have dreamt it up. And indeed, I mean, this book is really not about abortion. It just kind of
No,
is
no.
included along the way. But it is true that I think lots of fiction that is about abortion is this kind of dystopic, forward-looking, and we say about these things like, oh, it's set in a future that we recognize. And it's not that that's not valuable. It's hugely valuable. But what's happening at the moment means you don't have to set it in a future. You don't have to set it in a dystopia. It's here and now. Here we are.
This is the dystopia.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
So that it
Yes.
just changed
Yes.
everything. Yeah,
And actually,
as it does.
and I think that's such a good point. Let's also walk away from that part of it because that is such the at the crux and it's but really the story is about relationships and the relationships. This is
Mm.
about and she lives in the old folks home with her ex-husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she has a boyfriend who's really can you call them boyfriend and girlfriend when they're like in their, I guess that's the only word we have, but and then she has these two new friends, and then she has this wonderful relationship with her, her children are fraught. Children are fraught. Like,
Yeah.
our relationships with adult children, are fraught. And mine, I don't know how old your daughter is, but my daughter is 26 and my son is 24, and
Mm.
they kind of think they know everything about everything.
Yeah.
And I only imagine it's going to get worse, right? Where they're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
this, Mom, this is how you should,
Yeah.
and so there's that. And then also she has these lovely relationships with her grandkids, which I really, really love.
Yeah.
So it's really about, and you watch her navigate this situation with grace and also some, hurt and frustration and all the things you expect.
Yeah.
But it's really about the relationships, and they are beautifully drawn.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, for me, that's the ball game. That's what I feel like this is what novels suit up for, is to develop the relationships between people and let them talk about difficult, complicated things. I feel like one stance on abortion or really so many things is like a social media post. You believe this, it's
Yeah,
a sentence, end of. Whereas if you want to actually get into what's difficult and complicated and nuanced about these issues and the issues that are born of these issues and the other things that are related and the ways in which all of this is requires negotiation among humans, which is always complicated. Like, then you need a novel, then I need
yeah.
300 pages and 10 hours of your time, and and people to show up and talk to each other, and that's what novels suit up for.
Right. And I love it. And she runs into a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives, on this issue who are right in her face, which again is it's such an interesting thing because I think as a, the last thing we expected at 77 and, for our sakes, Laurie, I hope this is not going to be our reality at 77,
Yeah.
is to be able to be sort of live peacefully in some, like less, less demanding, less, in this limelight. And all here she is, having lived kind of a, normal life, raised three kids, all the things, all of a sudden is now like she's in the news and people recognize her wherever she goes. They're camping out and they're leaving, which they of course they do. They leave like teddy bears and bouquets of flowers as though somebody has died, or whatever.
Right.
It's so our world is so, and that is as much a part of this story as anything else, is our
Yeah.
obsession with other people's business, right? Other people's stories.
Yeah. Yes, yes, which again is just, I thought, a really powerful metaphor for the whole thing. One of the things that Pepper realizes over and over again is that old women disappear, that she's just completely ignored by by people out in the world, but like also even by her own children in different ways. Like people out in the world, it feels like they just don't even see her. Her own children, of course, they do see her. They're not ignoring her, but her with it. But I mean, it's what you're just saying. They think they know better than she does. They think that she's wrong. They think that she's incapable of making decisions for herself anymore. They think it's, that this is that her experience and her intelligence and her needs and her wants, like none of that stuff is like relevant as far as they're concerned anymore.
Sideline.
And which is just an extraordinary shift, and in this case a remarkable contrast with social media, where the whole idea is like your every whim, your every idea, everything that has ever passed through your mind or occurred in your life warrants a social media post of some
Yeah.
kind, and everyone's opinion is like, you have a responsibility you've read this story online, you have a responsibility to post your gut reaction to it. And for her, like the contrast between those two things is, sort of whiplash inducing.
I do actually, I have this, I'm working on a book that's sort of like, it's a little speculative, but it really does center on the idea that women become invisible, the ways in which we become invisible. And there's something lovely about that, right? Because that, like,
Yes.
the first
Right.
time in our, like, since I can remember, you're,
Yeah.
there's not the weird, like, attention to things you don't really necessarily want attention to. And on the flip side, we're so sort of raised to,
Right.
respond to, I don't know, covet, react to that attention, that when it disappears, there's also the sense of like, well, wait, where do I fit in the world? Um,
Yeah.
and I
Exactly.
think that is that's another sort of whole part of this conversation. And it's not even happening just to Pepper, but of course also in some ways to to her adult, children who are, 40s-ish, right? Um,
Yeah. Right.
and then there's the idea of young love. Like she's a granddaughter who's in love, and there's, you really do. I want to know how you do. I want to know how you do this. Tell me how you do this. How, when you're developing a novel, which obviously I know you spend lots of, years on. How has the story happened for you? What sort of, is there, like, in this case, even the original version of this was, was it the sort of the seed was the pregnancy, or did you have this family, and how did they, were there different, people, and you sort of thought, well, she needs these, how are you building the world?
Yeah. I find that it's different for every book. Do you find
Isn't
that it's
that,
different for
yeah,
every
isn't
book?
that helpful? You're like,
Yeah.
that didn't work this time.
Yeah. That's exactly, like it's all of this very, very hard won wisdom that does you absolutely no good, because it only applies, I find, to that particular project. And the next project, I have problems, but they're not the same problems, or at least they're not the same solutions to the problems. This one started with that idea of a pregnant grandmother. Like that was definitely the seed of this thing. And then the rest of it, I start, it, I thought, I don't know if you find this. I find that the problem is I don't know what these characters are going to do or even who they are until I meet them, but they don't exist until I write them. So basically, like, I guess wrong and badly for draft after draft after draft after draft until these people start like speaking for themselves and explaining, like clarifying themselves. And then I think like, oh, okay, I know who you are and what you need to do. And then, I go back to the beginning and fix all of the many things that are broken. And then after like 3 or 400 times of doing that, I
Right.
I have I have characters who have, I have characters who feel like people, who talk like people, who have meaningful relationships, but not at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think
And
that's, so you're not somebody who sort of laid it all out in your head first. I
I
know.
wish, I mean, I would if I could. I
I know. That's,
absolutely would if I
I feel
could.
that way too. I'm like, oh, how does one do that? And I agree. So you sort of like, you're like, I know there's a pregnant grandma, and it's about like, how does she find out she's pregnant? How does she get pregnant? Like, and then
Yeah.
it's about, and then by the end of I always find by the end of the first draft, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get who you are. And like you said, I go back and then it's, it's six or something drafts before I'm like, oh, now I understand who you are and why you're
Yeah.
doing what you're doing. And now let's go
Yeah.
back and clean this up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's true for even for the minor characters too. Like no one is really clear at the beginning. I mean, I sort of went in, one of the things that I never know is like I like to have big casts.
Yes,
Like
you
big
do.
cast of
Yeah.
character, I do. And then so they kind of get peeled off along the way. It's a question of like how many children of hers can I usefully how many children can I give her and develop them all as characters? How
Right.
many grandchildren can I give her and make sure you can keep them all straight? How many friends? How many, it's like how many people can you shove in there? The ex-husband, I was really I just think he's such a funny guy.
Oh,
And their relationship is different and interesting. But for a while I was like, am I gonna be able to keep this guy, or is it too much? Is it too many characters? And some of it is dictated where you're like, okay, well, there has to be a love interest because otherwise how is
yeah,
this
she's
pregnancy occurred?
right. Right. And you're
um
like, right. And you're like, well, she could have gotten pregnant from her ex-husband, but that's a whole
yeah,
different story. And we don't want that. We like the clean ending with Roger for her. I think
yeah,
I think it's so lovely that it feels like she's sort of falling in love for the first time at 77. Which
yeah,
I also think
right,
is like that's the whole idea of you don't know you haven't met all the people who love you, right? And she's
right,
she's on the I mean, who knows where she is towards the end of her life, but she's
right.
certainly more further along than
At that end, yeah.
than not. But and I think the other thing you do beautifully is that some of those characters are sort of more minor. I mean, she has, she has four grandkids. She four grandkids? Yeah,
Yeah,
four grandkids. And
yeah,
two of them are, a little like a little bit more, the twins are a little quieter in her life.
yeah.
And the girl's a little more involved. And that actually works, right? Because I think if we had to feel like everybody gets equal bearing, we'd never.
Right. You'd never get through it, indeed. And how much of that, like everybody has to get their scene. Everybody has to, show up, but you don't want it to feel too like set piecey. Um, and it all wants to be, and some scenes are more important than others. Like I went into this knowing not just that she was going to need to have this love interest, but that there was going to have to be a sex scene. And I didn't want to gloss over that sex scene. I didn't want to like they stare into each other's eyes and then fade to black. Like let's look at this. Let's look at what this looks like. And she observes that she says, I know that no one wants to hear about this part, but I don't know why, because we talk about sex everywhere, in everything, in all sorts of wildly inappropriate ways. And but once we're talking about old people, and it's not just that people are like, oh, that's wrong or that's inappropriate. People are like, that's gross. And
Right.
I think,
Why is it
that's
gross? Right.
why is
Our
it gross?
bodies
Like,
change. We get older.
yes.
It's not like we're asking you to watch them on stage. Like let them have their and it's also two older people, right? It's not like
That's right.
and even if
It's
you were
right.
like somebody like it was like a 80-year-old and a
That's
20-year-old,
right.
like that might seem weird, but these are two, age appropriate human
Consenting
beings.
adults. Yes.
Right.
And it's interesting to me that people react with disgust because I just think we should be so lucky. We should all be so lucky to arrive at that age and still have romance and sex.
And
I just
intimacy.
think these
Yeah,
people are living the
absolutely.
dream.
Right. And actually, especially for, women, that's not that common, right? Because men die so much, men die younger. And
Yep.
also men oftentimes, if they get divorced, they end up with younger
Right.
partners as a,
Yep.
as a cliche or
Yes.
whatever. Anyway, so that I thought was lovely. So okay, so what is the day? I mean, when you're in the middle of a book, which sounds like you really are, I mean, you're probably in the middle of a new book now, right? It's
Yes.
weird
Yes.
thing we all do where we're like, wait, what book am I talking about? And when you're in the middle of a book, so do you have a schedule that you adhere to? Are you sort of try to be in it every day? How do you, because one of the things I find most challenging, particularly about a book that is, emotionally really deep and also, choreographically complicated, is you
Right.
lose touch with
Yeah.
it and then you really lose touch with it. Like if I'm away from it and I'm in the middle of tour, I have no idea what the book I was writing was about. But how do you sort of keep that? How do you keep in touch with the characters so that you don't feel like you're starting over every time you get back?
Yeah, I do when I am drafting and revise, like when I'm in the thick of things, honestly, I keep hedging this, and I think I have no need to hedge. At any point when I'm working on a book, I'm doing it pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Um, when I can, if I can. I mean, I feel like it's not that I am making myself sit down and show up. Is like that. I love it. It's great. It's a two-sided thing. Like one is that when writing is going well, there's no better feeling.
100%.
And when I'm blowing it off, if I don't, if I don't show up, if I don't write, then I feel like shit.
Yeah.
So it's basically win-win. Like,
Yeah.
I am really pretty happy to sit down and at whatever part of the process. And I think that the other thing about it is that like the beginning of writing a book and the end of writing a book are not remotely the same activities. Drafting is different than editing, is completely different than like revision or I mean, and so it's always, like as soon as you get kind of antsy about the one thing, like great news, you're on to a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually think the other thing about, to your point about the sort of win-win, is that the other thing is that the longer you're not with it, the not only the more miserable you are, but the harder it is. So it's like it
Yeah.
really does pay. It's like going to the gym or eating well. If you don't do it, you kind of feel lousy the next day. And so it's that whole idea of like keeping in it in a way that really does, but there's life is in the way too. I mean, you're probably about to do some tour stuff that'll make it really hard. Do you leave
Yes.
your current project? Can you leave? Do you feel like you're leaving it in a place where it'll be okay, or does it feel like or do you sort of? Is there a way that you? And I'm asking also. This is totally selfishly
Yeah.
because I've just
It's
been on tour since February like 24th, and I'm trying to figure out how I could have tugged the book along a little bit with me.
I mean, it's really hard. First of all, that's a long tour.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah,
What idiot thought this was a good idea? It was
it was you.
absolutely me.
I mean, tour, and also, I mean, not just like being physically away, but I think the last months of book promotion where I just don't have time because I'm answering 80 emails a day
Yeah,
and
and you're
all
writing
of
other
the
pieces and
right,
interviews and this kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. And so then I am away from it for really a long time. Um and 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 in some ways I think it's really a wonderful thing because then when you get back to it, you're like, hooray. I
Yes.
mean, I'm just so happy and relieved to be like back in my pajamas in my office
Yes.
writing.
Yes.
um
I feel that.
yeah, and I just think that that's a really wonderful thing. I was teaching full time when I wrote all of my first and most of my second novel, and the first one in particular, I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't do it when the semester was happening. So I would hand in grades in May and then sit my ass down and write all summer long until I had to get a syllabus together in the fall. And then I wouldn't even open that file for the entire 9 months of
Wow.
school. And that meant that by the time I was ready to sit down again in May, I was so ready to
Yeah.
write
Yeah.
that it just like powered me right through. It's not, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but
Yeah.
it is
Right.
definitely motivational stepping away from it for a little while
Yeah. No,
and letting your brain like
I was
marinate on it.
I was gonna say yes. And I imagine that your brain marinating on it does and actually sort of move it forward in some weird, unexpected ways.
Yeah, right. It absolutely does. Yeah. And and even, I mean, I I think like psychologists would have better words for this, but like it definitely feels like, okay, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. Okay, now
Yeah.
is really, really a good way to get words on pages and to have like worked some things out in your brain that would have worked out differently if you were putting words on pages.
Yeah. So how is it different now? Now that you're you are mostly, a
Right.
writer. I mean, there's my Daniel, my agent likes to talk about this is your author time. So this tour part is like being an author. And I'm just so desperate to, I mean, this is all, you wait for this. You wait for this between books. You're
Yeah.
like, so to be an author, I want to go out into the world with my book. And then as soon as I'm out there for 10 seconds, I'm like, I want to be a
It's
writer.
like, oh no.
I
Yeah.
want to go back and be a writer. I don't, this other thing is for somebody else. I want to be the writer. So,
Well, and it's almost literally for somebody else. I mean, not quite as it turns out, but it does really strike me all the time, and especially just pre-pub, that these the personality required to like sit in a room by yourself with people you made up for years on end is like the opposite of the personality required to, go forth and promote a book. Never mind like the opposite of the wardrobe required and the opposite of I mean, it's just
Right.
really, really a wildly, wildly different part of the job. And both are wonderful.
Yeah.
And and I'm very mindful of how lucky I am to do both of
Right.
these things.
No question.
Absolutely, no question. But it's definitely a thing where by the time I get home, I'm so happy to to be in charge again is also, I think, part of it. And at the moment, there is much about the current state of affairs that is not the way it would be if I were in charge. And so and over which I feel and am quite powerless. And so to go back to like the other really wonderful thing about writing is I everyone does what I tell them to do. And that's and there's narrative justice. And if you
Yes,
sin, you
right.
will be punished for it.
Yeah.
And gosh, that's really very, very
But it's
gratifying.
not simple justice, right? I mean, it's not,
Yep.
and do they actually do everything you want them to do? I'm sort of curious about that, right? You're like, you are going to do what I want you to do. And then they're like, not, no, we're not.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and that in fact is how I know that a draft is working, is when the characters start to surprise me. And it comes out of my fingers and I react as if I'm reading it. I'm like, my God, I never saw that coming. It's amazing. It's really wonderful. It's true that they sometimes have different ideas than I do.
But
And
it's simpatico. Whatever they're doing
yeah,
makes sense to
that's
you. It's
right.
not, they're
Yeah.
not like, yeah, they're not off and running like a Nazi army. That would make no
No,
sense,
no,
right? You're like,
no, no.
this is
Yeah.
all within my brain is working with me and for me, not
Yes,
against most of the time.
that's what I think. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
No, it's so, can you tell us anything at all about what you're working on? And feel free to say no, I understand.
I mean, I would if I could, honestly, but it's so early and I'm not sure it's working at the moment. Uh, and and so we'll see. I'll keep you posted. I'm excited to find out.
So does this happen to you or I mean, you published, I think, are you at seven? Is this the seventh or
This is
eighth?
my sixth.
Six,
Yeah,
okay.
enormous
So
swings, my sixth.
does it happen to you that do you have false starts?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Or just things that change so completely that to me they're the same book, but you wouldn't necessarily
Yeah.
know that going in. And I also think that sometimes it's not even that the project changes so much as that it's not about what I thought it was about. And so
Right?
if when I go in thinking this is what this book is going to be about, and it's like, no, it's not. It's going to be
Right.
about this other thing. And all and so if I pitched it to you and then I would be like, oh yeah, that is the same book. It's the same idea. It's the same characters in the same plot. It is about a completely different subject.
But I don't even know. I found like when I finished Pinky Swear, I mean, there's the premise, like the hook, right? Like
Yeah.
there's the 77-year-old pregnant woman, but what it actually ended up being about, I didn't even. I mean, I still was like, oh yeah, that's interesting. That ended up being a theme I
Yeah.
didn't expect.
Yep.
And I think that's yeah. So that makes total sense to me. And I love to hear it. I always feel like it makes me feel so much better when other people's processes are similar, like a little like fumbling around in the dark for a year or two before you sort of figure it out. But whatever it is, I know it's going to be super, super exciting. Laurie, tell our listeners where to find out where you're going to be, and how to connect with you and to, find out about the books they haven't. Because I know we have a huge population of thriller readers, and also, of course, all
Oh,
readers read lots of things. So,
yes. Oh, yes. All readers read lots of things, and that is really the best thing about being a reader. And and me too. I like to read. I like to mix genres up. Often at the same time. Like I like to be reading 5 or 6 books at a time, and to have none of them be in the same genre. It's like it lights up different parts of my brain. Maybe I love it.
Me too. I never get bored if
Yes,
I have like multiple books going and if they're very, very different. And I think you need a palate cleanser. Like for somebody who writes thrillers and reads a ton of thrillers, it's a lot of thrill. That gets to be like you can get yourself in a little spiral of anything, I think. Whether it's really dense
right.
literary fiction or poetry or romance or thrillers or all of it. So it's kind of fun. I really find it fun to sort of be like, okay, I did that. Now what else? What can I do next? And stuff.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I think. That's great. Um, I'm on Instagram. I try with Instagram. Social media is not my strong suit, but I definitely do try to do it. Really the place, like the clearinghouse for all of it is my website, probably the easiest place, which is lauriefrankel.net. Um, and but I also have a Substack, which is called Butt Plus Chair, which is how you write a novel. You put your butt in a chair, butt plus chair.
I love that. I know button
Yes.
chair is what everyone has been. I've heard that said for so many years. That's wonderful. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I love that. LaurieFrankel.net and it's LaurieFrankel. If you're
Yes.
listening to us, not watching. Plus, if you
Yes.
Google it, probably any spelling, you will get to Laurie Frankel, I'm sure.
Probably. Yes.
And
Yes. And from
Enormous
there you
Wings
can,
is,
yes. Awesome.
and you got to go look at this fabulous cover that they did for you. I love this. It's
They
amazing.
did such an amazing job. I have look, this is the final.
I saw
Look
your
what they
gorgeous
did. They
hardcover.
wrapped it around. How cool is that?
It's gorgeous. It's
They're
absolutely gorgeous. And we
geniuses.
will be giving away a copy of this book either on our
Oh, good.
Facebook page over at Danielle's Killer Women on Facebook or Killer Women Podcast on Instagram. So go check us out over there, everyone, and go pick up anything by Laurie Frankel. But this was just so much fun, Laurie. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. You're doing amazing work.
Oh, thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining us on Killer Women with Laurie Frankel, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.